For all these years, we've been told a myth by ZANU-PF that rural communities are their strongholds. That myth has finally been busted by the overwhelming support we've received in these communities. And despite the odds are very many, you've seen all of them, the political violence, the murder of our supporters, you've seen the burning of CCC members' homes, the removal of our posters, the petrol bombing of our billboards. You've also seen a number of our citizens being intimidated and harassed. Citizens remain defiant. People are ready and mobilized for change. And if the temperature and the tempo on the ground are anything to go by, all indicators point to the defeat of ZANU-PF in the coming election. Now, as has been the case for several months now, we are keenly watching the electoral playing field, and we want to state that in this election, more than any other, citizens are at the center. And despite a tilted playing field, citizens, first and foremost, must turn out in their masses on voting day so that we ensure that our vote is too big to rig. It's imperative for citizens to defend the vote after voting in a massive way. Now, you'll have all noted yesterday that Mr. Nick Mangwana was in 6s and 7s trying to sell a lie that it's illegal to defend the vote. In fact, it's a constitutional imperative, an obligation upon everyone, citizens and state institutions alike, to ensure that this vote is transparent and verifiable. We have an obligation as citizens to ensure that the election meets the credibility test, that it's free and that it's fair and meets and holds up to the constitutional standards. And so it's a matter of record that we're mobilizing polling agents, but their task does not end there. As citizens, we have to stand guard after the vote has been cast, maintaining peace and order, of course, observing our 300 meters rule, and ensuring that until the V11 is posted on the polling station, we don't go home. Every citizen, as I said, is allowed by the Constitution to verify the count and to ensure and satisfy themselves that the vote is free, fair, credible, and verifiable. In this sense, citizens must be the primary observers of the election and safeguard it jealously. It's worth making a small note on polling agents. As the CCC, we're on course to having all our polling agents accredited by the date that's been set at law, which is the 20th of August. And we're very thankful for the support and assistance of citizens through various initiatives to defend the people's vote, including the adoption of polling stations. As you can see, all the ingredients required for a citizen's victory are there. There's been mass registration, everyone is mobilized, and now we must ensure that there is mass voting and mass defense of the vote. On the 23rd of August, it's important that nobody is left behind. This is an election for everyone. A word on the consolidated voters' roll. Our lawyers are actually before the High Court at the moment, where they sought audience with the High Court judge who had deemed the matter not to be urgent. It's our position as the CCC that no other case could be more urgent than this. We are now less than 7 days to election day, and we don't have the updated voters' roll, consolidated, the one with all the polling stations that were gazetted, and it's necessary for us to have that so that every citizen is clear as to which polling station they're going to vote at, and so that we can also comb through that voters' roll and make sure that it's searchable and analyzable, and that there are no gross irregularities such as would impinge the transparency, credibility, and verifiability of the election. I turn now to the printing of the ballot paper. Section 52A of the Electoral Act is very clear. All political parties, including the CCC, were supposed to have been informed about where and by whom the ballot paper was being printed, including the number of the ballot papers that were printed. Unfortunately, ZEC has conducted itself illegally in failing to comply with that provision of the electoral law. As far as we're concerned, this is a material breach of the electoral law and something that cannot be acceptable. ZEC as a state institution and an administrative body have an obligation to act lawfully, reasonably, and fairly under Section 68 of the Constitution. And that's something that we've taken up. I'm going to speak to it in a minute. Before I do so, it's important to make a note about the postal vote. Our incident tracker has been awash with reports from prison officers, police officers, other security forces saying we're being forced to vote under the direction and supervision of our seniors. Such a command vote is obviously unconstitutional. Everybody knows that under our electoral law, your vote is your secret. So you can't have your superior standing over you to check whether or not you voted for CCC. We all know that Mr. Mnangagwa was on record saying that the prison officers and other security forces have voted really nice. Obviously, we've done our bit to ensure that they're mobilized for change. But at the end of the day, they're citizens and they're entitled to have their constitutionally enshrined right to vote per Section 67 protected. They're entitled to secrecy of that vote. And so throughout the course of this morning, our Elections Directorate, led by Councillor Ian Makone and Ms. Ellen Shiriedenga, went to Police General Headquarters and also to ZEC to raise the alarm on that postal vote. It's obviously unlawful, especially in circumstances where Section 52A of the electoral law has not been complied with. All of that points to a material breach again of the electoral law. For the avoidance of doubt, we condemn command voting and the lack of transparency of the postal voting process. What do they have to hide? Why should it be done under a cloud of secrecy? Why should it be done in a manner where police officers, prison officers, and other armed forces are being monitored to make sure that they vote the right way? We are obviously monitoring that situation very clearly, and that's something that Ms. Shiriedenga is going to speak to in a moment. A quick word on political violence. Political violence is outlawed by the electoral law, by the Constitution. As the CCC, when we signed the peace pledge, it was our commitment to say we don't need violence and coercion to get support. The masses love us. The masses love our movement. We have no problem with a festival of ideas. We can beat ZANU-PF when it comes to selling our policy plan, our proposal. We've just launched a detailed manifesto which sets out our plan for progress. So we don't need to be beating people up. We don't need to be ripping apart their posters. We don't need to be petrol bombing their billboards. We don't need to be beating up their supporters. We don't need to murder them. We just want elections and not war. It's most unfortunate that our counterparts, ZANU-PF, are bent on unleashing violence in our communities. And in response to that, we've set up rapid response teams to ensure that communities are safe and communities are protected. Our lawyers and our welfare team are on standby to ensure that citizens are safe throughout this period. We're also keeping a tracker of all the incidents of violence. In fact, our Elections Directorate is in the process of compiling a dossier that's going to be given to the SADC Observer Mission and all the other observer missions in the country so that they've got a sense of the extent to which ZANU-PF conducts itself violently when it's staring defeat in the face and when its back is against the wall. And we'll ensure that that dossier is made available even to members of the press. On that note, yesterday we had a very worrying incident where 40 of our members were unlawfully arrested. They had applied to conduct a rally at Churu Farm, and when they were on the way to Churu Farm, mobilizing, going through Machipisa, the police ambushed them, hijacked them, and unlawfully conducted a dragnet arrest, resulting in the arrest of Mr. Hakata, who's standing in Glenview, who's our candidate there, as well as a number of other, at least 39 other CCC members. Our lawyers were immediately deployed to the scene and are obviously mounting a bid for their release. But in campaign season, especially in Glenview, where we see ZANU-PF conducting its own campaign activities every single day without interference, we expect that the playing field, in as far as campaigning is concerned, to be free and fair. We don't expect ZANU-PF to abuse state institutions to stop our members for campaigning. So we continue to demand the immediate release of Mr. Hakata and the Machipisa 39. They should not spend more than another moment under police detention. They committed no crime. As we said when they murdered Tinashe Chitsunge, it's not a crime to wear a yellow shirt. It's not a crime to be a member of the CCC, and so we continue to demand their release. Like I said earlier, we say to ZANU-PF, what are you afraid of? Why can't we just have a peaceful campaign? If your ideas win, fine. But if ours do, you do have a constitutional obligation to respect the will of the people. Now, I just want to close off my section by saying this. In the days ahead, we're going to ask the citizens to do the following. Firstly, check your polling station so that you know where you're supposed to be voting on voting day. How do you do this? There's a chat bot that was created by the citizens, which will enable every citizen to know their candidate, especially where they're fraudulent fakes, especially the so-called double candidates. The chat bot is very simple to use. It's available in English, in Shona and Ndebele. All you need to do is WhatsApp, hello, moro, sawubona, to the number that's provided. It's +130 579 10002, and you just follow the prompts. It's very easy to use. You'll get to know which polling station you fall under, where you're supposed to go to next Wednesday, and which is the legitimate candidate that you're to vote for on behalf of the CCC. We encourage everybody to get there early. Most of all, most important of all, encourage all your friends, your family, your work colleagues, your church mates, your neighbors, everybody you know. Voting works. And like I said at the start, we have to ensure that it's too big to rig. The citizens that we've spoken to across the length and breadth of Zimbabwe continue to refuse to be discouraged. They say, no, we are going to vote despite the odds. And it doesn't mean that we accept that it's okay for the playing field to be tilted. But what we do want is a constitutional change of government and a citizens' victory for change. This is the last mile, the final stretch. And so we call upon all hands to be on deck as we win Zimbabwe for change. Without further ado, I'm going to defer proceedings to our Elections Directorate, who are going to share with us some of the touch points that they have, and then we'll field a few questions from the press and then call it a day.
Of concern to us as the CCC is that, contrary to Section 52A of our Electoral Act, we as the stakeholders, particularly political parties contesting in this election, we're supposed to have been informed with respect to the ballot paper as to who is responsible for printing it, the quantities. That information is shrouded in secrecy. As of now, we get to hear that the ballot paper is out there, and it's a cause for concern as the stakeholders. More so, if you can recall, some of you in the previous elections or even in the last by-election of March 2022, the candidates were given the opportunity to go and inspect the ballot paper. But this time around, nothing of that sort was made. The only sample of the ballot paper we have is the one circulating in social media. And that is a cause for concern. We can't be updated via social media, we as the political parties, because we feel we are very key stakeholders in this electoral process. Looking at the social media reports and the picture of the ballot that we saw, it's a cause for concern. That is, if that is the actual ballot paper that we are going to use on election day. The burden of proof now lies with ZEC to give the stakeholders the opportunity to inspect the ballot paper. The ballot paper itself, the design, the law is clear when it comes to that. The design, the ballot paper should be designed and the names arranged in a single file in alphabetical order. But the ballot paper, which is in circulation, it's in 2 columns. Clearly a way of, igniting the profile of Mr. Mnangagwa. The reason why I'm saying that, remember we have 11 presidential candidates. The first column goes up to number 5. Then the second column from number 6 up to number 11, and ZEC decides to put Mnangagwa at the top, which is clearly illegal. If you can recall, even in 2018, we had a similar concern with the 23 candidates that participated in the election. We said, well, the law was breached, or probably ZEC was overwhelmed by the numbers of presidential candidates, which were 23 then. But this time around, we only have 11. But ZEC goes on to repeat the same 2 columns. So clearly, we know why that is being done. Clearly is to profile Mr. Mnangagwa, and we are worried as the CCC in terms of the breach of the law. And going on to the issue of postal voting, we only had an announcement from ZEC with respect to the numbers of people that applied for postal voting and those that qualified for postal voting. The number which we got from ZEC was 17,633. Those that succeeded and that were duly accorded the status of postal voting. Of concern with that kind of information is that it's not specific. We do not know, for example, how many people applied for postal voting in Harare, in Bulawayo, Mashonaland Central. When we speak of the verifiability of and transparency of the election, which are the key tenets of any electoral process, and even if you go to our constitution, there's clarity on that one. But with the postal voting, there's an element of opaqueness there, which is quite worrisome. Not just us as the CCC or the people of Zimbabwe, but the affected persons, being in this case, the security details, the diplomats that have been accorded that opportunity. Be that as it may, Section 75 of our Electoral Act is very clear in terms of the voting procedure for the postal voting candidates. And the aspects of secrecy of the vote, which is also emphasized in Section 57 of our Electoral Act. But the amount of distress calls that we got is from yesterday, and even up to now, we are still receiving those distress calls. And they are not just confined in one particular region, they are spread throughout the country. And clearly, whatever is happening there is the same which is happening throughout the country. An indication that there's a command out there to say this is how postal voting is supposed to be conducted. Just as to dramatize what we have been told, and also what has been witnessed by some of our members of parliament that we assigned to go and observe this process. And in particular, our members of parliament responsible from Bizo and Kwekwe, they rushed to Kwekwe Central where the process was taking place. We have a situation whereby security details are asked to vote, in according to their sections. If you are in law and order, you go and group there. And in other section, it goes and group there. CID is another grouping. They are given their ballot papers, and there's the senior persons, being the commanders, being the superintendents, they'll be seated there. Once you have voted, like what was happening in Kwekwe, you cast your X. Before you seal that ballot paper inside the envelope, you are supposed to show your superior that you have voted for ZANU-PF. which was clearly, that was the case in Kwekwe Central Police Station. And we have no doubt that it's been happening throughout the country, because these distress calls that we're getting, they actually confirm what was observed by our colleagues in Kwekwe. So that in itself brings into scrutiny the credibility of the postal votes. And we've just written to ZEC on that matter, and we are waiting to hear their response. The secrecy of the vote is very crucial. That's where the gist of any election is. And clearly, as a country, we are faced by a regime which does not want people to express their free choices. We can't actually isolate the postal voting incident with what is happening throughout the country. We have cases documented which we are going to bring about, which we are going to highlight in our dossier, where we have even village heads writing down names of people and even indicating to say, you'll be number 1, you'll be number 2, you'll be number 3. So that those people can go and claim and falsely declare illiteracy or physical challenges, so that they'll be accorded the voting assistance privileges. And that is a cause for concern. We highlighted these issues during our by-elections last year in 2022, but clearly they are recurring. But well, the citizens of Zimbabwe, they know what they want. No amount of intimidation can stop them from choosing the leaders of choice. And we continue as the CCC encouraging people to stand up against all these lies and myths and intimidation. It's so bad that some of you could have seen videos that are in circulation to say that we are able to know, in terms of the serial numbers on the ballot papers, as to who would have cast the vote on that particular ballot paper, which is a lie. And there's a lot of myths and lies out there. So this is the other responsibility of our commission, ZEC, to dispel those lies. Because the law is very clear with regards to all these issues. The issue of misinformation comes into play here. And you members of the media, you also have a responsibility. And of course, of concern, lastly, with regards to media play. We had a workshop with the media last week, and there should be a media monitoring committee chaired by ZEC, which is supposed to govern, the conduct of media houses, journalists, and other media players. That is still not in place. So now we have issues around misinformation. Who is going to monitor that? Who's going to ensure that, there is a true record or a true reflection of what our law says with respect to elections? So, but however, that will not stop us as the CCC. People know what they want, and we continue using all the democratic channels, all our members, all the citizens out there, to spread the truth about this election. I thank you.
Thank you very much to both Mr. Makone and Ms. Ellen Shiryedenga. We will now just field maybe 2 or 3 questions before we close this press. We know that the media has to go somewhere else. So.
Okay, my name is